great weekend. This episode today has been requested by a friend of mine who wanted to know about how I create my characters in RPGs and LARP. Now, when it comes down to role-playing games and live-action role-playing games, you tend to have attributes, stats, skills assigned to a character, but that doesn't make the character who they truly are. Because let's face it, a character is far more than just a character card or a sheet of paper saying what dots of skills they've got. And that also applies to writing creative fiction. I've got a novel in the works, and I've used the same rules that I use with writing RPG characters for my actual fiction characters. Now, imagine everyone's got different kind of rules, guidelines that they use when they're creating their own characters. I tend to use the mind's eye bit as sort of guidelines to start off with. This was the first ever tabletop stroke LARP system that I ever used, and also became a storyteller for in a Vampire the Requiem game. Now, there's a section in that particular book which has been really useful and sort of follows generic questions that you would consider when you're generating a character, and I'm going to briefly talk about them now. I tend to not assign a name to my characters at the start because I actually find that to be the hardest part for me. What I'll normally do is I'll assign probably an age and a race to that character if there's different races in the system that I'm playing in. I tend to actually play human. I'm a bit boring like that. But the first questions that I tend to answer are: how old is she and where does she originally come from, where was she born? And who are her family? Does she have any siblings, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles? Are her family still alive? Where are they? Do they have any arguments with her? Are they on good terms with her? Particularly with my characters, I've always found that family tends to have quite a big influence on my character's motivations. For example, the first character I ever played, which was in the Requiem game, was a lawyer who had followed in her father's footsteps, but was a bit of a well, she was an avaricious sort to start off with, prior to becoming a vampire, and she was turned on the night that she basically disowned her father, which kind of really motivated her to become a bit of a better vampire. I'd also consider what education, if there's any such system in place in a particular system, or what training has she actually acquired during her life. So for the first character I played, who was Alex, she was a lawyer and she'd spent a lot of time in law school. She'd actually kind of graduated, I think it was a few years ahead of what would normally be considered normal, and so she was pretty much a child prodigy. Whereas my current character, Isabel, she is pretty much self-educated in a way. There isn't really, she's not a scholar, but she is more educated than, let's just say, the common schlub. I then move on to kind of ask myself, you know, where does she live now? You know, what kind of situation does she find herself in terms of her home and her job as well? Like, what kind of role does she actually play in the system or in the group that she finds herself in? For example, if it was a tabletop game with a Firefly, what kind of role does she have on the ship? Also, is the character in a relationship? Is she single, married, divorced? These things can obviously have an effect on like what her kind of emotional and mental state is like. Are there any significant events in her life that has shaped the way that she views the world? For example, with Isabel, she had an event not quite unlike the tragedy that befell Bruce Wayne, in which her parents were both murdered in front of her. And that has certainly shaped the way that she feels about a lot of things. She's got strong abandonment issues. I do tend to go for kind of tragic characters, unfortunately. It's really important for me as well to consider what kind of code of ethics or moral code that my character has, because that pretty much shapes the way she's going to interact with other people. I do tend to play good characters, lawful good or pure good, but I have played slightly chaotic evil in the way that I have killed other players just for the fun of it, because my character just thinks it's funny. I do apologise to those players who've lost characters as a result of that. I'm so sorry. I'd also ask myself if my character would consider that the ends justify the means. Obviously that goes into a bit more morally ambiguous territory there, which I don't tend to play a lot. I'm quite a black and white person anyway, so I don't tend to go with more grey characters. However, it's useful to know whether or not my character would make choices based on the greater good. Religious beliefs also come into play, whether or not my character actually has any, how strong they are. My first character was Alex. She was a Catholic, and that was quite interesting to play because she was actually kind of on the Opus Dei kind of self-flagellating kind of vampire, which was a bit creepy to play actually. My current character in the LT system is, I guess you could call it religious because ancestors are technically gods, and she is very strongly devout in the worship of True Unicorn Pantheon. Normally though, I don't tend to play a lot of religious characters because I really don't like religion out of character. But certainly the characters I have played who are religious, it's been very interesting to kind of explore the religions that they actually participate in. And finally, if there were any magic or supernatural forces in play in the system, how does my character feel about them? Is she magically inclined, or does she not like them at all? Now normally I'd come up with a basic concept to start off with, and if there are stats that I'd have to assign, I'd move on and look at them, generate my character and flesh out the background as a result. I kind of do it in tandem with statting up, as it were. Certainly with characters now, I mean, I've not really played a lot of LARPs or tabletop games, but certainly now I would consider myself to be someone who kind of tries to make the stats reflect the character, but to not truly define the character. Now the guidelines that I've discussed, they're kind of a brief generic process that I go through. However, that's not set in stone. There might be things that organically come in my head and decide that, well, I really want to have that in my character's background just because that would be really cool. And obviously if you're a player in a tabletop game or in a LARP, discussing that with the storyteller, GM or whoever's running the plot is a really good, useful way to kind of figure out if that's going to work with the system as well. So that's how I pretty much generate my characters. And my questions for people this week are, for those who do LARP, tabletop RPGs, or even writers writing novels or other stories, how do you create your characters? Is there a process you go through? Are they different points to the ones I've talked about? For those who do tabletop RPGs, do you tend to stat up your characters first, or do you do the complete background beforehand? As always, leave your comments in the box below, and please feel free to like, share, subscribe, leave feedback on the Facebook page. And thanks again for watching.